Hey guys, number one Marduk fan here. We're looking at Pokemon Adventures Volume 15, Ruby and Sapphire. As the creative team note in the comments, it's the end of the long gold and silver arc. They updated their, the artist, Satoshi Yamamoto, updated his profile pic to Swalot. They pick one that kind of like fits with their personality vibe. And they just have some nice comments about how excited they are to start this new story arc. So one of the really neat things that Hidenori Kusaka does is he looks at all of these games, and the Pokemon games are very basic, like baby's first RPG style games. Especially, I think in the earlier generations, they were always like throwing weird ideas into them, so almost like they were trying to just see what would stick, or see if they could just throw a crazy idea out there and see if kids thought it was cool. And he really mines the details of the games to get really interesting story ideas, and then he explains them in the context of a story that makes sense. So this was kind of a weird experience because I kept having like little memories like long buried for years and years from playing this game. It's like I would have been a teenager by the time this game came out, right? But there was one thing that really bugged me, and I want to share this with you because it bugged me so much that I'm going to have to like consciously try to avoid making this mistake. So when Ruby and Sapphire came out, I took one look at this guy and I thought he looks like a dork who walks around with a stupid winter hat on. But that girl, she looks like a tough tomboy explorer girl. I'm going to play as her. And I played Ruby, so I said, well, obviously she looks like a Ruby. So I named her Ruby, and the dork was Sapphire, and I beat up. No, this is all wrong. They named her Sapphire and him Ruby. That doesn't even make sense. Ruby's a girl's name. Sapphire, nobody names their kid Sapphire, so at least that could be like a weird boy's name. But you hate your son if you name him Ruby. All right. So now I've got to do like a brain operation. I gotta pull the chunk out of my brain that calls her Ruby and him Sapphire. Oh, gross. It's got a bunch of like driplets and droplets and oil on it. Okay, now I gotta move it over to the left side of my brain. No, it's not going in there. Okay, you gotta like press it firmly and with force, like you're closing a car door. Ka-chunk! And twist it. Snap. Rattle, rattle, rattle. I hear a little piece of plastic rattling around in my brain. It's all wrong. Okay, so she's named Sapphire and he's named Ruby. Calling them that, it feels like when I was 6 years old, my parents told me, don't pick your nose or it'll get stuck that way. And I just stopped picking my nose in terror that I could live my life with my finger jammed up my nose. It's so wrong. It's so wrong. All right. So the cool thing is that it's sort of like Hidenori Kusaka actually kind of psychically picked up on a thought I had the second I looked at Ruby the boy when I was a kid, because I just thought he looked like a dork. And they always do some kind of twisteroo because the central point is always going to be the Pokemon and the Pokemon fighting each other, and the main character keeps changing every few volumes. That means they have to do something different each time. So Ruby is a little boy who likes to sew little hats for his Pokemon and to put them in Pokemon contests where they can show off how elegant and beautiful and well-groomed they are. And his father is a Pokemon gym leader who just cares about fighting. So what's really neat about this is it kind of connects with something in real life. He's like the boy who just dreams of being a ballerina, and his father's a football coach, and he doesn't want his son doing no stinking ballet. So there's that kind of like human dimension to it. And it's highlighting a thing from the games, which is that there were these Pokemon contests where you could have your Pokemon compete like they were in a beauty contest for dogs. It was just kind of like a weird thing. I think I tried it out and said, that's kind of cool, but I'm going to get back to the regular game. But there were probably some people who really dug that aspect of it, and they kind of want to make sure to highlight that or make it important. Later, let's see, why did I mark this? Okay, here's another like just cool thing. So this is the first game where if you press a button, you could run, whereas before you just had to slowly amble through the entire game. So that's like a new feature of this game. That's just there to make the game pass a little faster. And they get the bright idea that, it's because he has these special shoes that let him run really, really fast. And there's other cool stuff, like they read the Pokédex very, very carefully, looking for ideas for abilities they could have in the manga that they don't necessarily have in the games. But a point that gets underscored is that when Ruby battles, it's all about how his Pokemon look, whether they look beautiful or whether they look cool, but they're not necessarily the most effective in actually winning a battle. And so we meet Sapphire, who is a wild girl who kind of lives out in the wild, in the cave. Again, in this game, you could set up a secret base in a cave, and you could collect all of these cool little collectibles and decorations to put in your cave base, just like as a goofy little extra thing. But clearly they took that as inspiration for, well, if he is fabulous and competes in all of these elegant and refined Pokemon contests, she's wild and basically lives out with her Pokemon literally in a cave. So another neat thing about this is kind of a comedic send-up of a classic storytelling motif where it's like the dear refined Victorian girl goes out into the wild and she meets Tarzan, the wild ape man, right? Like it's always some wild and dashing and daring young male hero that she meets. But this is an inversion, is that right? Is this the inverse of that trope with a fabulous young man and a wild young lady? So it's comedic, and there's great, like, they're bouncing off each other because they just have a completely different perspective on how to raise Pokemon. So they agreed that we're both going to try to accomplish our dream in 80 days. And if you can win all of the Pokemon contests in 80 days, I'll give you props, and I'm going to try to conquer all the gym leaders in 80 days. Was that my kind of like last thought? Yeah, I guess there's also kind of like a neat thing where I guess there's like a kid with cancer or something in this game. And of course, you just have to beat him up repeatedly. That's what you do in Pokemon games. And that somehow helps him go on his journey. So they sort of set that up, and they kind of have a neat, what would it be? Because they kind of like name their Pokemon and give them distinct personalities. It's sort of like they make the Pokemon a bit more of a character rather than just have, I don't know, just like a random Pokemon pop up and that's just what it is. So the origin story is that he's never been allowed to train with Pokemon because he's a sickly child, and Ruby gives him his Ralts. So I think that while he had a Ralts in the game, this gives it a bit more of an origin story and gives them a connection that he's now training a Pokemon that was once Ruby's. So that's pretty neat. And then apart from that, it's kind of like the standard fear of like, oh, the bad guys show up, Team Aqua, they're kidnapping people. I want to highlight this because it's just a great example. So Ruby, not Ruby. See, I did it. I almost did it. Sapphire, the wild girl, Ruby made her a fabulous outfit so that she can actually wear clothes, and she has to compete in a gym leader battle, but the gym leader's a nerd and expects trainers to pass an exam before they're even allowed to fight her. So there's this neat thing where Ruby has a bad vocabulary. She even like struggles to spell her name correctly, but she's very knowledgeable of Pokemon because of all of her field experience and training with them in the wild. So there's this kind of like neat element that once she has someone read to her what the questions say and everybody thinks she's a joke, she actually knows everything that has to do with practical knowledge about Pokemon. So she aces the test. So it's just a really neat way of underscoring comedically her strengths and her weaknesses as a trainer, and it just ends with a setup for a battle. So this is a great dynamic. Actually, in the games, the rival, this is where I felt like in the games the rival stopped being a big important part of the games, because you were basically just fighting the other sprite that could be the trainer, that could be you. Like before this, you were fighting a character like Gary or Blue or Silver who had their own agenda and were kind of a jerk. And this was the start of the trend of them just being a nice guy who you'd beat up on all the time. But they really, by having almost kind of like this romantic twisteroo and then switching it up so the girl has a bit more of a masculine tough guy role and the guy has a bit more of a feminine caring and elegance role, they really set this up as like a neat personality foil for the two of them that could even be a bit of a romantic foil. So we will continue reading and we will see how the story progresses. With that, I'm number one Marmaduke fan. I love you guys. Catch you later.